Solomon Kinloch and Mary Sheffield have just finished the first and possibly only real mayor's debate here at Channel 7. And it was, to say the least, contentious. I'm Elrick, on-guard government watchdog, columnist at the Detroit Free Press, and we're joined by Malachi Barrett of Bridge Detroit and Dana Afana, our City Hall reporter at the Free Press. And we're going to give you a quick take on what we just heard. We saw the debate. You saw it, possibly. It was an hour long, and afterwards, both candidates came out right here to tell us what they thought about it and to answer some questions, some of which they weren't too happy to be asked.
If I could distill the two main arguments that Kinloch and Sheffield made tonight, Kinloch is saying that Sheffield has not done enough to address the really pervasive problems of poverty and crime in the city of Detroit while she's been city council president and served on the council for the last 12 years. Whereas Sheffield has said, Kinloch is pointing out problems but doesn't really have any solutions to bring to bear here. It's kind of ironic. We're in Southfield. They also kind of attack each other for not having enough expertise in the city of Detroit. What did you think?
Sheffield, I think she pointed out a lot of what she's done on city council despite the attacks. And I think this was probably the most contentious debate so far. I didn't expect it to be as heated as it was, but I guess that's the nature of politics.
Sure. And Solomon Kinloch is trailing badly in terms of fundraising. He only got 17% of the vote in the primary. Mary Sheffield, the city council president, got 51%. So we haven't seen any polling, but I think it's fair to assume that Kinloch needs to make up some ground. There's two ways you do that. You build yourself up, you tear the other candidate down.
I was talking to the Kinloch campaign before tonight about kind of what the strategy would be for the debate. And they see this as an opportunity to really knock Sheffield off of her pedestal in a way that has not really been done so far throughout this race. There were 9 candidates in the primary, really struggled to get any good shots in her, at her, before she ended up winning that primary with 51% of the vote, and has kind of cruised ahead, picking up a lot of endorsements, picking up a lot of donors and influential supporters like the current mayor, Mike Duggan. And, Kinloch, I think, has struggled to kind of make himself stand out. You saw him trying to differentiate himself from Sheffield throughout the night. Interestingly, on the issue of whether the National Guard should come to Detroit, Kinloch seemed to allow for some room there in some specific circumstances. So it'll be interesting to see what the community's reaction is to that. But generally, the argument tonight was Sheffield just hasn't done enough to fix the problems, and it's time for somebody else to come in and take the reins on that. And I kind of wonder how well that will land with voters, especially voters who maybe have been touched in some positive way by what Sheffield has done on the council.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting for her to kind of call him out by saying, you don't practice what you preach, when she said you can't build each other up by tearing each other down. And again, like the whole night, she just kind of went back to what policies she actually succeeded on, and that some of these things do take time and funding. And she made some promises today about how she would have things like, building an office for gun violence prevention to address a lot of issues, not just crime, but mental health issues in the city. And I think, the question begs, like, how are you going to fund these things, especially when federal resources are so limited? But that's going to be kind of a wait and see situation for either one of them who are making such big promises. I think another thing that really surprised me was the Kinloch promise of issuing $1,000 to every new baby in the city. How is the city going to fund that? That's something that's pretty new to the city. That's another thing that I'm particularly interested in.
Sheffield gets some really good jabs in tonight. It felt like if Kinloch's goal was to come in here and be aggressive, Sheffield did a really good job, I think, of knocking Kinloch off his game as well. She basically said he's been absent from a lot of the problems in the city. He has churches spread throughout Detroit, including one in her city council district. And she said, hey, buddy, I haven't seen you in my office. I haven't seen you at city council meetings. Where have you been on all these issues until it became time to run for mayor? And I think that kind of took the wind out of some of the attacks that he had on her tonight.
And he fired back that we haven't seen you. So there was a lot of back and forth. We talked before the debate that this could go one of 3 ways. Either Kinloch could attack Sheffield to try and make up some ground. Sheffield could take the high road and ignore all of it. Or they could go at each other hammer and tongue, which is really what we ended up seeing. And Dan, I think you touched on a great point. Sheffield had to be prepared to be attacked. And sometimes candidates come into a debate with a line in their pocket that they're just waiting for a chance to bust out. And she quoted Kinloch from the primary saying, you can't build up and tear down at the same time. And she was ready when that happened. Were you surprised? Do you remember that line from the debate in the primary?
It's been a minute. I don't, if I look back, then yeah, I probably could find it, but I don't actually remember it. But it was honestly, it was a pretty strong response to what he had to say. And I think she came prepared for this. I think she also knows that she faces a double standard as a woman, as the first potential female mayor of the city of Detroit, as a Black woman as well. So this is going to be a pretty big race. I think also it's pretty natural for the candidate in second place who's trailing behind to really go on the attack. It happens in so many debates. It's happened in 2017 debates, happened in the gubernatorial debate. It's very natural for that to happen in these things.
Anybody that watched the debate will also note that Kinloch basically tried to frame Sheffield as corrupt and, having ethical concerns that voters should be worried about, calling attention to her solicitation of concert tickets. And Emil, do you want to talk about kind of what happened after we were trying to get some more clarity on some of these questions and it ended not in a great way?
Sure. So one of the things you didn't see if you're watching on TV is there was some questions from reporters to Solomon Kinloch about how much time do you spend at your home in Oakland Township? And that's something that Mary Sheffield made a point of letting viewers know that he's got a pretty big spot outside of Detroit. They both were very proud of the Detroit roots, although Mary Sheffield went to high school in Southfield and Solomon Kinloch moved to Southfield once he became successful, or at least Oakland Township. But we also asked Solomon Kinloch if he could back up his claims that people who were in the suite where Mary Sheffield's tickets from Comerica Bank were used for the Jeezy concert had paid her for the tickets, or said they paid for her for the tickets. He would not provide us names. We're going to follow up with him. But when we tried to ask Mary Sheffield about that, she didn't want to answer. And it wasn't really until she walked away that she said, no, I didn't take any money for that. It'll be interesting to see if anybody investigates that. And if Solomon Kinloch is right, that they may answer differently under oath than they would when we call them and they say, yeah, no, that never happened.
Yeah, and he kind of indicated that we might get a different answer when we try to reach out to some of these folks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But Sheffield, at the end of this, basically is saying that Kinloch is whipping up a lot of misinformation and kind of cynical attacks on her that he isn't really able to back up. Whereas, I think Sheffield herself has kind of struggled to find like a direct line of attack on him besides just, you've been a church organizer, you haven't really been involved in the government here. And so why should people trust you to step in? And we're kind of in a time of political outsiders right now, nationally in this country. I do think that message will resonate with people who look around and they say, the mayor is celebrating these record low crime numbers, but somebody on my block was shot this week. I know people that have been affected by gun violence. It doesn't feel like the city's getting safer. It doesn't feel like there's more affordable housing. I do think that lands with people. But Kinloch also took the extra step of he basically was questioning the veracity of the data that the Detroit Police Department releases on crime stats. And when pressed on that, he kind of backed away from that assertion the more we kind of try to dig down on whether he has evidence for that claim as well.
Now both you guys watch city council pretty closely. Dana, you've seen Mary Sheffield up close for quite a few years. Was this a side of her you hadn't seen before, or has she shown this kind of fire before when things get a little chippy in City Hall?
I wouldn't say this is the first time, just because, and you'll remember this District Detroit vote, when they came in with this whole package and proposal. She was really firing away at the developers and everyone involved in that project on what community benefits that they can promise Detroiters. And I think that was probably the first time I've seen her get so heated, but she was also very focused on what she wanted for the community. And so I think from that point on, she has really gotten smarter about how she just kind of the points that she's trying to make. She's a lot more prepared. She's a lot stronger in her points. And I think it's only going to grow from there. I will say, though, something that Mayor Duggan has done that has stood out to me is he's a metrics guy. And he's provided all these stats on how Detroit has grown or declined. Or I guess we've kind of found those stats. But I think that's something that this next administration is probably going to have to hone in on as well to really prove a point of Detroit's progress.
Yeah, Sheffield really hit Kinloch for having a lot of proposals, but no specifics. Malachi, have you seen very many specifics from Sheffield about what she plans to do if she's elected mayor?
I mean, she does have quite a detailed policy record that we've been able to look on. You guys had a great story today, actually, about how much of that has been accomplished and where it's kind of fell short, with the reality of politics and all of that. She's gone into pretty good detail, I would say. I mean, I've attended a number of her town halls. I've seen the presentations that she's given to community members. She's got, programs, dollar amounts behind those programs. She has an understanding of how the city government and the budget operates, leading the council as president and, being behind a lot of these negotiations behind the scenes about where funding goes. She actually criticized Kinloch tonight for not being really aware of a 13th check for pensioners, and kind of feeling like a lot of his expertise is lacking in that area. I definitely would say that she has had some pretty detailed explanations for the things that she wants to accomplish.
Well, certainly being in City Hall for the last 12 years, she knows the buzzwords. How many of these things are going to resonate with voters? The 13th check, if you cover politics, we know all about it. If you're at home, you're like, 13th check? I didn't get my first check. Let's take the second check too. Let's get up to 13 as soon as we can. This was a debate. They give each of the candidates closing statements. So before we wrap it up, let's go to each of you for your final thoughts on what we saw tonight and what it may mean for the race ahead. Danny, you want to start us?
I think we were surprised, but also prepared to hear what they had to say and prepared to hear how this debate went. I think the two of them are really going to have to hit the ground, though. They both truly believe that this is their win. So it's going to be interesting to watch the two of them and how they campaign for the rest of the cycle.
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm giving Sheffield too much of a pass here tonight, but I do think Sheffield responded well to a lot of the attacks that Kinloch had. She had an answer for a lot of them, was able actually to turn the hand around and say, these things you're accusing me of, you're not so clean yourself. She actually accused him of throwing stones at a glass house at one point on the issue of corruption. And I think, this was a big opportunity for Kinloch, who has avoided a lot of these community forums and town halls and even interviews with the press, in which we have really, extended an olive branch to him to help explain what he wants to do and given him plenty of opportunity. This was a big opportunity tonight for him to do that. And I think they fell a little short of what they were hoping to accomplish in terms of showing that he has a strong plan for moving the city forward. Got a lot of good digs in on Sheffield, attacking her. But for folks that were maybe wanting to hear more about what is it about Kinloch that makes him ready to execute on some of these things, I just don't know that we really heard that in as much detail as I was expecting.
So if you want to get the highlights of the debate, Dana and Malachi have been writing about it. We'll have more in freep.com and, of course, at bridgedetroit.com. And I'll have my take on it in On Guard that'll post very soon. Please consider subscribing to support our work. And you can also make a donation to Bridge Detroit, because we're the only news organizations that have people in City Hall who are watching these things. So when they say something, we can tell you what the real deal is. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I guess if you're not watching, but we really appreciate you tuning in tonight, and we'll have coverage all the way up to election night. Don't miss it. There's a lot more to tell.